Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your math video number 1. Today's video is going to be about SOL 4.1a and 4.1b. 4.1a says the student will identify orally and in writing the place value for each digit in a whole number expressed through millions. 4.1b says that the student will compare two whole numbers expressed through millions using the symbols greater than, less than, or equal. Okay, so that is what this video is going to be about, and we're going to jump right in. So these are the place values you will need to know for 4th grade. We're going to take a look at some patterns that will help you read large numbers and understand the relationships and values of the digits within that number. So let's go ahead and just put a number in, and then we'll work with that one. Okay. See a number I didn't use yet. There we go. Okay. So the types of questions that you're going to want to be able to answer as a 4th grader are, what is the value of this 6? And since the 6 is in the 10,000s place value, it is going to be the same as this. Since it's in the 10,000 place value, and you have 6 of those, it would be the same as saying 10,000 times 6, which is the same as 60,000. So that 6, that digit right here is not, the value is not a 6. The value is 60,000. Okay, another type of question that you're going to hear is, in which place value is the 7? Something like that. So you're going to find your 7, and you're going to want to know what place value that is. So then you're going to want to know that it's a millions, because your place value goes through the millions. So that would be good to know that one too. And then what digit is in the 100,000s place? So then you find that place, and you tell me what digit. They just want to know 8. If they said, what's the value of 8, you would say 800,000. But if they ask you what is the digit in the 100,000s place, you would just say 8. Okay? So if we go ahead and look again at each of our place values right here. I'm just going to write them in at the top. In the ones place, I'm just going to write a 1. Tens place, this is a 10. Hundreds place. Thousands place. 10,000s place. Now I'm wondering if you're starting to notice a pattern. Look at the numbers that I'm writing. What is the pattern? The 100,000s place. The millions place. I'm running out of space. The 10 millions place. Do you see the pattern? What's happening? The 100 millions place. Okay, so what is that pattern that we're seeing? As we go through each place value, it is increasing, right, by 1 0 at the end. Well, what kind of mathematical function are we actually doing when we add a 0 to the end of a number? If we go to from 1 to 10, how much are we multiplying that 1 by? It would be 1 times 10 is 10. 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. 1,000 times 10 is 10,000. So every time you're increasing in your place value, just going to switch colors here, we are multiplying times 10 to get to the next level. Okay, so that's really important to understand as a 4th grader, that from going from hundreds to 1,000, you are actually multiplying times 10 to get to the next place value. Okay, so let's take a look at this. You know, sometimes when you are reading large numbers, it can be pretty complicated at the beginning before you really understand the pattern. But being able to read those large numbers and say them out loud is a very important skill. So we're going to just take a closer look at the patterns, and then we'll see how it's really not as complicated as some people think. Okay, first of all, let's take a look here. I think you guys all remember this from 3rd grade, that we have 3 place values, and every 3rd place value is its own period, right? And you always remember that comma. And so what we want to figure out is what the names are of those periods. Now this one we don't say a word at the end when we're reading that, so we'll just call this the units. This period is called the thousands. This period is called the millions. Okay, but then within those periods, it's the same pattern. Ones, tens, hundreds. Ones, tens, hundreds. So in the 1,000 period, you're saying thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. In the millions period, you're saying millions, 10 millions, 100 millions. It's the same no matter what. So all you have to do is remember the name of the period. And what we're going to do is zoom in. We would say 612 millions. 651 thousands. 68. That's why we don't really have a name for this one. We just call it the units. So we just say 68 because there are no hundreds. So let's try that again. 612 millions. 651,000. 68. So when we look at the number all together, I want you to remember that. So it's just this one little number that you have to read, and then you say the name of the period. 612 millions, or you don't say the S, sorry, 612 million, 651,000, 68. Okay, and then over here, past the 1, we're going to be adding in a decimal point. As our year goes through, we're going to start learning on this side of the decimal point too. But for right now, we're just going to talk about things that are on the left-hand side of the decimal point. Okay, so, and then you know what? The great thing is no matter how big the number gets, you're still going to have that same pattern. So look down here. I added on the next period, which is billions. And the next one after that is trillions. But it's the same exact pattern. You're going to read this little number, say the name of the period. So this would be 6 billion, 612 million, 651,000, See, that wasn't so hard. And that just takes practice. The more you do it, the more comfortable you're gonna be. Okay, so in 4th grade, you're going to be looking at numbers in different forms. So here's a new number. What is this number? I want you to pause this recording and try to read this number to your learning coach. Go ahead and pause and then press play when you're ready. Okay, so it is 1,234,567. And when you see all the digits written like this, this is called standard form. So if they ever ask you to write the answer in standard form, you're just going to write the number. Okay? Here's our standard form, but we can also write it in the written form, which I think this is the most annoying for all students and even adults. Nobody likes to write out numbers in the written form, but it is an important skill, so we're going to be practicing that this year. So to write out this number in written form, you would just use your words, 1,000,000, and look at this, we're going to use commas right where you use commas in the word, or in the standard form. 1,000,000, comma, 1,000,000, comma, 234,000, 234,000, comma, 567. Okay, and so if you notice, you use this little hyphen in between, like 34, 45, 67, anything like that. You're going to use that little hyphen. That's how you write it correctly. All right, so that's going to take some practice this year, but you guys will get it. And then the last way that we're going to be writing our numbers is in expanded form. And this can be a little bit intimidating if you've never done it before. But if you look closely, it's just saying what place value each digit is in. So what digit is in the millions? 1, and it's 1 times 1,000,000. So you're going to take that place value and put it in parentheses to separate it from everything else. Then you're going to add it to the next place value. So there's a 2 in 100,000, so 2 times 100,000. You're going to keep that in its own little place by using those parentheses. And you're going to add it to the next place value. It's a 3 in the 10,000 place value. 3 times 10,000. And you just go through the whole entire number like that. So, you know, that's a little bit big. So let's go ahead and just take a real quick look at this in a smaller way, and I think it's a little bit easier to understand. So this is 762, but if you wrote it in expanded form, you would first take that 7 and say 7 times 100, because it's in the hundreds place, and you add it to that 6, which is in the tens place, and then you add it to that 2, which is in the ones place. Okay? Okay, so I think a more familiar thing that you may have seen before is if it was written like this. 700 plus 60 plus 2. And that is also called expanded form, but since you're a 4th grader now, they want you to bust that 700 up even further by saying 700, like that. We're going to bust that 60 up even further. There's 6 tens. So they really want you to understand what these numbers mean. 2 means there's 2 in the ones place. Okay? So that's just going to take some practice. So for right now, I want you to go ahead and show what you know. In each math video, we're going to have these little show what you know slides. And what you do is you solve these all by yourself. You're going to pause it and solve them. You're going to write them on a piece of paper. Definitely write them on a piece of paper. Say number 1, and then write your answer. number 2, write your answer. Number 3, number 4. Because at the end of this video, you're going to have a survey, and you're going to write those answers in the survey. So make sure you write that down. Go ahead and pause the recording and press play when you have finished all 4 questions. All right, well, we're going to move on to that next topic. And this can be pretty simple, but then as the numbers get big, it can get more complicated. So we're going to start out simple and get more complicated as we go. So obviously what you need to know about comparing numbers is that this symbol here means less than. So if you see it in any kind of math problem, you're going to read it as saying less than. So if you saw this, you would read 2 is less than 3. Okay? And then if you flip it around, that's when you say it means greater than. And this obviously is equals to. You guys have learned about these probably since kindergarten, maybe 1st grade. And as the grades increase, it gets more and more complicated. But those 3 things remain the same no matter what. Okay? So this is going to be a little bit old school. You may have seen Mr. Alligator many times over the years. You basically want to think about, because that's one of the trickier parts for the kids, believe it or not, is knowing which way to face the symbol. So if you think about it as an alligator, he's hungry and he's going to want to eat the biggest number. Okay, so here we have Mr. Alligator, and it says, alligator, alligator sitting in the swamp, how many pizzas do you want to chomp? 1 or 3? I'm a very, very hungry alligator, so I'll eat whichever one is greater. 1 is less than 3. 3 is greater than 1. I'll eat 3. Yum. So you can see how his mouth is going towards the bigger number, right? So that's how you know which way to face it. It's going to point at the smaller, and it's going to eat the bigger number. Okay, so this says 1 is less than 3. Okay, and then the same is true the other way. So the 4 is bigger, so you're going to want to eat the 4. So you would read this as saying 4 is greater than 2. So you guys all know this. You've practiced with this many, many times. So let's go ahead and go on to a little bit more complicated things. Some tips I want you to remember is to always double check this, because your eyes can play tricks on you when you're trying to compare larger numbers. I think a lot of you struggled with that in this math lesson. In the Math Red book, I had to check on several assessments because the students were getting these types of questions wrong. And I know it's not because that you don't know how to do it. It's just your eyes can play tricks on you. And so I'm going to teach you some tips on how to make sure that you can get it correct every time. So the very first thing is definitely know what these symbols mean, and that it's going to point to the smaller and it's going to open up to the bigger number. So if you know that you're on the right way. But the other way is just to double check, and let's take a look. What we're going to do, I'm going to write 2 numbers, and I want you to remember your place value chart, because you can do this no matter where you are, but you just have to be very neat with your handwriting. So let's say I'm going to compare 153,798. And my other number is 154,612. Okay, so You always put that comma after those periods. Okay, so what I want you to do, if you have these bigger numbers, and a lot of times they're written side by side like this, and that's really hard to compare them. So just take that extra step and write those numbers on top of each other and line them up by their place value. Line them up with their commas. Make sure those commas are lined up. Okay, and then what I want you to do is you can either do this just with your hand, or you can actually take a piece of paper like this, and you're going to start at the very biggest number first. 1 and 1. So they both have 100,000. So we're not going to be able to decide which one's bigger. We're going to go to the next number. They both have 5 in the 10,000 spot. So we're not going to be able to tell yet. So let's go to the next. Oh, now they're different. Okay, so one has a 3 and one has a 4. So all we have to know is which of those two numbers are bigger, the 3 or the 4. Well, we all know the 4 is the biggest. So right away, I can just make a little note to myself that this one is bigger. So then I can go back to my problem and say that 154,612 is greater than 153,798. So the trick is to always start over here. Don't start at the ones. You want to start with the biggest place value first. Okay, so that's just a little tip. I always do that when I'm comparing larger numbers, because like I said, your eyes can play tricks on you. Okay, so this is what I would do if I were in a classroom setting and I had this as on my worksheet that I needed to do. And oh, all these 3s and 0s and 1s, it's playing tricks with my eyes here in this first problem. So I'm just going to come over here, make little boxes if I want, and I'm just going to write it down. So the trick is make sure you write them place value to place value. So put your commas in the right places so you make sure that you're writing the number correctly. Okay, so I'm going to write my first number on top. I'm going to write my second number on the bottom. Can you guys figure out already which one's bigger? If you were watching, following along, I bet you caught it. Okay. So I'm going to just take my handy dandy piece of paper, go to my largest number. They're both 5s. Go to the next. They're both 0s. Go to the next. They're both 3s. Go to the next. Here's a 0 and a 1. Okay. So I know that the 1 is bigger than a 0, so I automatically know that this bottom number is larger. So I'm just going to make a little note to myself. This one's the largest. And then I'm going to go over here to my problem, because then I have to somehow answer it. So I'm going to look for that number up there. Oh, there it is right here. That's the same as this bottom one. So I'm going to point that little greater than symbol at that, because it's bigger and that alligator is going to want to eat the bigger number. So that's how I know how to do that. Okay, so now the tricky part is really if the easiest mistake to make is not lining them up by the place value. So if you had the number, let's say 9,645, and then you also had 999, and if you lined them up like this, then you might think, okay, here we go, 9s are the same, the 6 is smaller than the 9, so this number is bigger. And you can see right away that it's not, because there's 4 place values, so it's obviously going to be smaller this 999 is going to be smaller. So that's why you have to make sure you're lining up the ones place, then the tens place, then the hundreds place. And if you did that, then you would see that this top number is bigger because it has 9 thousandths and this doesn't have any thousandths. Okay, so just line them up by their place value. Take a look at the largest place value first and slowly go across. And I think that you guys will do great. Okay, so this was actually one of the problems that a lot of you were getting wrong in the online school. So the question says, which set of numbers is in order from least to greatest? So we want them to be from the smallest to the biggest, or least to greatest. So we got to figure out which one of these is right. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and pause the recording and try to figure it out yourself before I do it for you. Okay, so go ahead and pause the recording and press play when you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start putting these numbers in. If you notice, for this particular question, they're using the same 3 numbers over and over and over. So this is the same as this and as this. They're just putting them in different places. And then this is the same as this and this. So they all 3 have the same 3 numbers. So if you take an extra look and see if that's the case, then that kind of helps you out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write these numbers in my little squares. Make sure I line them up. So 3 spots over, here's where the commas should be. And so learning coaches, this is a really good reason why it's always great to have graph paper handy. You can buy that at Walmart. Just get a pack of graph paper, because with fractions and multiplication and long division, being nice and neat and lining things up is really important to get the questions correct. And so sometimes the learning coaches just use graph paper, and in each little square they write their numbers so they keep them all straight in rows. Okay, so I'm going to figure out which one is the biggest first. So I'm going to get my paper. Okay, so I have the 3s, they're all the same. The 6s, they're all the same. Oh, okay, I got 2 7s, and 1 4. Well, I already know this one's the smallest. So I'm going to write that down, because the other 2 both have 7s. So that 4 gives it away that that one's the smallest. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, so now we're only looking at the bottom 2 numbers, because we've already decided that this one is the smallest. So now we're just going to look right here. Okay, so now we're just going to compare the 2 and the 3. And we know that a 3 is larger than the 2, so this one is going to be the largest. And this is the one that's going to be in the middle. Okay, so then you just have to come up here and find which one represents that. Which one has, let me move this blue square, which one has this number as the biggest. We have to look, they're using less than symbols. They want this to be the smallest and this to be the greatest. So this is our largest number here, so up here I found it. So I already know, because these 2 aren't the right ones. So I already know that this top one is the correct answer. Okay, so that's how I would solve that. Now, did that just take a couple seconds and me just kind of looking at the numbers? No, that took a lot of hard work, didn't it? I was very careful and I wrote out my problem and I did a lot of thinking and made sure I was very nice and neat. So that's what I expect from you guys when you're doing your assessments in your online school, is take your time and make sure you're writing it down and make sure you're doing your very best. When you take those extra steps, you're going to see that you're correct more often, okay? Awesome. Okay, so now you get a chance to show what you know one more time, okay? So which of these is the biggest? This is number 5 on your survey. You're going to write your answer down on your paper. Remember, you have that paper that has number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Write number 5 down, and you're going to write down which number is biggest. Is it A, B, C, D, or E? You're going to only need the letter answer.